Minister, thanks so much for joining us. What does the government hope to achieve with this Royal Commission? Is it to allocate blame? Is it to identify ongoing problems that still exist? This is wide-ranging, so what do we hope to achieve out of this?
I think the first thing we need to do is to ensure there is a thorough examination of what clearly seems to be a systemic failure of institutions to respond to child sex abuse allegations. We need also to provide a vehicle for victims to tell their stories, to be heard, and to have their claims properly investigated. But ultimately, it's about finding ways to prevent in the future children being abused, and that in the end, I think, that will be the test.
Well, at the end of all this, then, if there's not long-term policy reform, has the Royal Commission done its job? Does there need to be a change at a policy level to ensure this doesn't happen again?
Well, ultimately there'll be decisions that will flow from the report itself. As you know, commissions in the past have led to very significant changes of policy. They've led on occasion to significant prosecutions arising out of their inquiry. So the destiny of the commission is in the hands of the commission to a large extent, set by the terms of reference. But what flows from that quite often are significant changes. And we do need a societal shift. We need a shift in the way in which we conduct ourselves as a nation, and we need to examine the manner in which religious organisations, non-religious organisations and children that have been in state care, how they've been dealt with, because clearly it is inadequate. There's too much evidence to show that they've been victims of child sex abuse and that people have been turning a blind eye to that abuse, and we need to fix that.
There's a lot being made about the timing of this Royal Commission and how long it might take once the terms of reference have been worked out. I mean, is it difficult? Obviously it's difficult to put a time frame on it, but it does need to be limited as well. So where's the balance here?
Well, I think firstly we're looking to determine the terms of reference and the composition of the Commission by year's end. That's important we get that done. We're doing that in consultation with religious leaders, with other organisations, with organisations that represent victims. I think the terms of reference to some extent will set the parameters of the duration, but ultimately, as I said earlier, the Commission controls its own destiny. It looks at these matters. We want it to give it full powers. We want it to have an independence, and to that extent the government is not in a position to restrict where it goes.
No, it's not in a position to restrict, but looking at history when it comes to Royal Commissions, the Aboriginal deaths in custody took nearly 3 years, the Costigan Commission almost 4. So is that around ballpark?
I think people would be looking at years rather than a shorter time frame. This is a very large task. This is quite a broad inquiry, and this will take some time.
Also, we've seen comments from Cardinal George Pell this morning. He's welcomed the Royal Commission, but he's had a swipe at this one-sided media coverage that he calls. There have been numerous convictions, though, against pedophile priests. So isn't it right that the media have some focus on the Catholic Church here?
Well, the media will go wherever they see, I think, matters arise, whether it's court decisions or whether it's allegations of serious abuse of children. That will happen. I think it's also clear that the abuse of children has happened well beyond one religious organisation. It's happened across the spectrum. It's happened to children in understate care. It's happened in not-for-profit organisations, and that's why the Prime Minister set the parameters to include all such bodies that have been caring for children. To limit it to one organisation would be entirely wrong. It would be effectively locking out.
Is there a chance here that it could muddy the waters and perhaps make it too broad, though?
Well, I think we have to consider the terms of reference so they're effective and allow the Commission to do its work, but it would be really quite cruel to lock out victims of child sex offences that did not happen in one body. And to that extent, I think it's important that it's broad enough to cover the field.
Okay. Just, Minister, on the polls today, Tony Abbott's approval rating is the lowest in 3 years, but the Labor Party still isn't in an election-winning lead, according to this latest news poll. So shouldn't your party be a little ahead at this stage, given Tony Abbott's unpopularity?
Well, look, I mean, these things come and go every fortnight. You know, we're supposed to be turning our mind to those matters. I think there's no doubt that people are looking at the Leader of the Opposition and wondering where his plan is for Australia, and I think that's probably reflected in the polls. But the government will just do its job. We've got a very positive agenda. We want to get on with reforms that are needed, and we'll allow the sort of commentators to dwell on those other matters.
There's no celebration here looking at these numbers for the Labor Party yet, is there though?
Well, we're just getting on with our work, I think, but there's no doubt. We don't need to read polls to know that after waging a scare campaign to try and terrify the Australian people on carbon price reform, the Leader of the Opposition is left wanting because he has no policies and no plan for Australia's future.
Just on your portfolio area, Minister, on homelessness, this was Kevin Rudd's almost personal crusade when he was the Prime Minister, aiming to halve homelessness by the year 2020. There is not a good trajectory towards that. It has actually risen, and the government's funding, this national partnership agreement on homelessness, $1.1 billion, that's set to end at this financial year. Will the federal government agree to extend that?
Well, firstly, in relation to the ABS data, of course there were some disappointing areas. There are also some very promising ones. A 13.5% reduction in rough sleepers, much more people in supported accommodation, but clearly a lot more needs to be done in overcrowding, where people are deemed to be homeless in overcrowded situations. And I think that's about increasing stock and affordable housing. It's something that the states need to attend to significantly, because we have built literally 21,000 social houses since we were elected. We're putting in. Now, in relation to the National Partnership on Homelessness, you're right. That expires at the end of this financial year. I'm meeting with my counterparts at a ministerial council on Friday. I'd like to see a commitment from them. We want to continue to invest in this area. What we'd like to see is the 8 other governments join us to continue to tackle this very complex area and realise the goals set out, that we do halve the rate of homelessness.
Is money the answer here? Is it more funding, or is it a more holistic approach?
Well, it's not. No, it's not necessarily more funding. It's certainly yes, of course, there needs to be sufficient investment by governments. There needs to be also. We also need to do it in an effective manner. We need to see prevention being a large part of any arrangement, early intervention. And also breaking the cycle of homelessness. I think too often we've spent a lot of money and allowed people just to churn through the system. We need to end that. We need to actually have the most effective means possible to prevent people being homeless, or if they are homeless, the way to get them back on their feet and so that they can get on with their lives. And I think through the research, through engaging with the not-for-profit sector, we've, I think, found some of the answers to that problem, and that will inform the future agreement, if we're to have one, with the states and territories beyond this financial year.
Brendan O'Connor, thanks so much for talking to us.
Thanks very much.